Good evening. It's almost 6:30, and it's the third Tuesday of the odd month. My name is Renee LaBelle. I think I missed all of you last time because I was somewhere, I think I was in Canada. Anyway, I just wanted to welcome any newcomers who are here for the very first time. Anyone here for the first time? Oh my goodness, we have a whole bunch of newcomers. Welcome. Please tell your friends. This started, what, Kurt? 12 years ago? 10 years, okay, 10 years ago.
Almost 12.
12, okay. So third Tuesday of the odd month, 12 years running. For our newcomers, I'd like you to know that this is a video recorded session, and we've been recording these for 4 or 5 years now, so there's quite a library of easy-to-get free PDUs on the UT Dallas website. So, sorry, I say UT Dallas website, that's totally incorrect. Project Management, UT Dallas, School of Management that we're in here. This is called the Applied Project Management Forum. So if you do a Google search for that, you'll find today's session, and you'll be able to view previous presentations from many years. Today is a session on leadership. And we're starting to do the new talent triangle thing, whatever it's supposed to be called. We're learning anyway. And tonight we have a great speaker. She wanted to be a space shuttle pilot, but it didn't quite work out that way. We all have dreams. And it turns out that when I was living in Madrid, she was living in Madrid at the same time. So we have some interesting combinations here. But I wanted to say she's from Tennessee, but she's been in Texas for a long time now. And will you please welcome Tresia Eaves.
So, good evening. Thank you for joining us today. I'm excited to be here. I just want you to know I'm trying a new style out on you today, and it's going to require some participation, and I do have prizes. So for those who participate the most, I might have a prize for you. And we're gonna do a little keeping track of how many of you participate the most. But my new style is more of a storytelling style, because my goal is to one day be the Brene Brown of project management. And one day Dr. Kersner is going to have to retire, and he needs someone to take his place. So having been the first original Dr. Kersner International Project Manager of the Year, now an award given through the Project Management Institute Educational Foundation every year, I feel it is my duty to take over for Dr. Kersner. So one day he will retire. So at any rate, so the Brene Brown of project management. Why? Well, because a lot of my experience comes through project management leadership, I would say. And so back when I was 22 years old and graduating from Baylor University, having gone there on an Air Force ROTC scholarship, I spent 8 years in the military, not flying jets like I thought, because in my first semester at Baylor University, I was a mechanical engineering major, and after the first semester I had a 2.1, which I required a 2.5 to maintain my Air Force ROTC scholarship, and I was the first person in my family to get a degree. And by George, I was not leaving Baylor that way, in shame, going home as a failure. So I changed to this new program at Baylor called computer science. And that was the most accidental, greatest decision I ever made as an 18-year-old. So I became a computer science major, and I'm happy to report that I graduated with a 3.0, and then I had a 3.9 in my master's. So obviously I found my spot. And I think those of you with college-age kids, I have one of my college-age children who is graduating in August from Texas A&M with a master's degree in biomedical science, and hopefully go into med school. But what you learn as your kids go off to college is they have to find their spot. And so I had to find my spot, and when I did, I also found my spot in project management in the Air Force. That's not what we called it, but I was leading software development efforts in the Air Force. And I flew on this jet called an AWACS jet, which if you watch Independence Day, it gets blown up in Independence Day. I was very excited to see that in a kind of crazy sort of way. But we did battlefield management. So we did big Circle 8s at about 24,000 feet. Oh, sorry about that. At 24,000 feet near battlefields. So this software that we used on the AWACS jet had several million lines of code. And I had just come out of Baylor University with a premier degree, having learned C++, having learned just the beginnings of what became object-oriented design. And I was thrust into a world of IBM 370 mainframes where the job control language read like punch cards. So I did software development for a while, but I have to tell you that my love came through testing software. And so when I was testing software, I was leading a group at the ripe old age of 22 of 11 software quality assurance engineers. And so the fun part about our job is we got to fly to test our software, because the only way you were going to really test a battlefield situation is to either be over Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada or flying over Iraq. So where there was no fly zones and you could see the bad guys taking off and not having flight plans and, you know, all that. So that was exciting, and I did that for about 3 years at Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma, where I was deployed probably about 260 out of 365 days a year. It's a really hard life in the military, but certainly worth it to get a degree from Baylor. So then while I was at Tinker, that's where I got my degree from OU, because Norman's just a little bit south of where the base is. So then I went over to NATO AWACS, and there we were installing, are you ready? Solid-state hard drives and like modern equipment in this old AWACS jet, a Boeing 707. So I was working with Boeing, so I was flying all the way from Germany to Chicago O'Hare to Seattle to meet with Boeing and build this new software that was going to be released. So that's really where my project management skills come from. I call myself an accidental project manager, but what was great is when I left the military, my first job outside of the military in civilian life, my boss told me about this thing called a PMP. And she said, you know what, I'm betting all your time in the military, you probably have the 4,500 hours you require to apply to take your PMP. That was some of the greatest advice I ever got. So it's been all whiz bang and greatness since then, although I did not become the first female shuttle pilot, I'm sorry to tell you. My plan was I was going to become a pilot. I was going to get my pilot's slot from Baylor. I didn't get that. And then I kept meeting the board every year. But I was going to fly 10,000 hours in an A-10 Warthog. Do you know what an A-10 Warthog is? Yeah, I wanted to fly that plane so bad. And then I was going to apply to NASA and become the first female shuttle pilot. This was my plan. So I kind of had a midlife crisis at 18. But I'm good. It's all good. So what I want to talk to you tonight about is something that seems a bit elusive in business today, and that is your ability to align your PMO to the strategic plan of your company. So just to kind of highlight my storytelling tonight, I want to talk to you about how strategic vision is set by your company, and there's a lot of different methods that companies use. They may bring in consultants. We'll talk through all that. Then we're going to talk about the organizational models that PMOs live in today. So I've seen a lot of different PMOs, not only from being a consultant, but having set up and run 4 of them myself. So we're going to talk about the organizational models that I think will help you be most successful, but whatever you're facing, hopefully we'll hit some points that will help you. And then what is your role in setting that strategy? Some people think, well, if I don't sit on the board or if I don't have a C in my title, I don't have a role in implementing my company's strategy. And I just don't think that's true, and we're going to talk about some ways that you can influence that. And then there are types of strategies on how to support from a PMO or project management perspective. Maybe your company doesn't have a formal PMO. Maybe project managers live in the business units and report up through a separate chain of command than having like a centralized PMO. So we're going to talk about some operational efficiencies in either one of those models. We're going to talk about how can you play a role in growth. How can a project manager play a role in growth of your company, since that happens to be part of the strategic plan of almost every business in the world. And then we're going to talk about something that's near and dear to Kurt, which is new product development and services development, which he would argue is simply the development of a new product when you develop a service. So I think we're in agreement there. And then we'll have some discussion, and if you have any questions you've been saving or didn't want to interrupt, but by all means, I'm an interactive speaker, so if you have a question, just get my attention. All right, and away we go. So I'm a big Covey fan, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, probably because that was one of the first classes that I took as a young Air Force officer. And so one of his concepts is begin with the end in mind. And so as the first part of that is understanding the process your company goes through. So how often does your company do strategic planning? Who participates? Is there anybody in your immediate chain of command? Are you part of strategic planning? And so how is the strategic plan developed? How is it updated? What drives those decisions? I'm encouraging you, especially as you get into the advanced years as a project manager, to think about these concepts. And then I'm going to talk to you a bit about my company's strategic planning process, because maybe you can take some of these ideas back to your work. So the strategic planning process for CGI is kind of exciting, actually. I've been working for 25 years, and I'm really jazzed about my company right now. We are a $10 billion a year Canadian headquartered company. Don't hold that against me. But we do planning every year. And it starts in June, so it's about to begin for the year. We do a survey we call them members. We don't call our people employees. We have 65,000 employees all over the world. So we take a survey. It's a pretty lengthy, in-detail survey of each member. So we do that thing you've dreamt about of mapping your employee satisfaction to your client satisfaction, because we do the same thing on the client side. So we interviewed last year 965 clients, and I think we ended up with like 41,000 members participating in the member survey. And we have metrics around participation of our clients, participation of our members, and we're measured and given performance bonuses based on those metrics. So it's very important to the culture of our company to get that feedback. So we take all the data from the 965 clients and the 41,000 members, and we start to draw some conclusions. And a lot of the questions we ask our clients are around what's important to you, where's your biggest spend in your IT budget, what trends are you interested in. So you can imagine last year we heard a lot about big data. We heard a lot about cloud solutions. We heard a lot about software as a service, infrastructure as a service. We heard a lot about security. So those ideas get defined in reports that make it to our senior folks, and they define the strategy for the next year. And they put people on them. So let's say we decide we're going to go learn about Workday, or we're going to focus on offering Salesforce.com to our clients. We have a system in our company that identifies people who have that skill set and that talent, and we pull those people together, and we create the business materials around selling that. We create a sales toolkit, and we start talking to our clients about it. And that's how we see if there's interest in business. And once the business starts to build around that, like big data and security and maybe secure payment systems for retailers. Once those things start building momentum, there's a lot of focus at the higher ranks of my company. And we come out with our strategic plan for that year. There's also a 3 to 5 year plan that uses the data to look 3 to 5 years down the road. We ask those questions too, to our clients and to our members. And so that's how we develop our strategic plan. So you can immediately see, as a project manager, how you would have direct feedback, right? Not only may you be in charge of a client who has a lot of business with CGI, but you yourself get surveyed and have an opportunity to put in your feedback for what you're seeing in your market. Because that's another key thing about my company, is that we're very geographically centric. So unlike Accenture or Deloitte, we don't put people on a plane and ship them off to work for somebody for a period of time. We are members of our community. So a client that I work with, their kid might play soccer with my kid. And that, we believe, helps build a culture of ownership, which I think is another key differentiator, is when you own the company, when it's yours, you have a different attitude. And we have 85% ownership of our company. So that means 85% of that 65,000 member base has stock in the company. And even one stock, as our owner and founder likes to say, even one share, you can have one share, and you can show up at the annual meeting and be heard. And that's very important to him, that we are all owners. So that's how we do our strategic plan. Now, as I said, I'm a very interactive speaker. And so would anybody else like to contribute maybe? And I'll repeat what you say so that we get it on video. But can you share any ideas around strategic planning within your company? I understand if it's kind of a business thing that you don't want to share that, but any? Yes, sir? Oh, good.
Hi. Well, I used to work for DHL, the logistic company.
Mm-hmm.
So every year we have a strategic meeting where we learn about the global strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And then DHL has 3 business units. I was in the Express, that is transportation of documents and packages under 50 kilos. So we knew about the strategy, or part of the strategy that the other 2 business units need to accomplish to make sure that the global company do everything. And then at the Express area, we have 5 different geographic areas. So also there, it was cascade to the things that we need to comply. And everybody knew. I was on the group that was called Business IT. So I was the interface between the business and the technology teams. So whenever the projects were defined, everybody from the business side knew what was the focus for that particular year.
Mm-hmm.
So there was no surprises whenever I come back and say, okay, so we need to prepare for such and such project. And then the life cycle of the strategy was 5 years. So every year we review how the strategy was going, and there was checkpoints every 6 months
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that we make the goals for that particular year.
Okay. All right, good. Thank you. And so what he's talking about is that his company uses the strategic planning process to create the program of record, which is the big, giant project list, racked and stacked in priority order, of how all of our work's going to get done that year, or maybe what won't get done, right? And so there's going to be some that are going to fall off or get delayed or moved for a number of reasons. So once the plan is set, so you have the big giant list of all the projects in priority order according to your strategic plan, however that's been developed. You have your priorities, you go marching, you have your budget. How do you map your activities, either within your project or within your PMO, back up to those strategic objectives? And so let's talk about some of those ideas. So obviously performance reviews, right? So one thing I did with my team, which I have one of the smallest teams right now that I've ever had in my career, even though this is the biggest company besides the Air Force I've ever worked for. In my folks, performance reviews, I will put goals that say things like, I want to discuss one innovation, one business lead, or one improvement idea from you every month. Now, we have bi-weekly one-to-one sessions, which are usually by phone, unfortunately, but just because of where we are in the Metroplex, it's not always feasible to get together for lunch or what have you. And a lot of our folks work from home because we're just that kind of company, and that's pretty nice, actually. So we talk about ideas. And, I think part of it is you need to ask your people what their thoughts are on this, but then you need to do something with it. So if they give you an idea for improvement, if they give you an idea for an innovation, and you just kind of take it and check the block that they did what you asked them to do, they met that criteria for their performance review, that's almost worse than not asking them at all, right? So it's important that if you're going to do this, and if this is all part of your plan for mapping up to your strategic goals, which it fit into our strategic goals, because one of the strategic goals was bring innovation, bring improvement ideas to the highest levels of CGI. So we could map that, but then you, as the leader, have to figure out how you're going to perpetuate that. And so that's important. And then, of course, there are cascading goals, which this gentleman talked about, where they're set maybe at the higher levels of the organization based on your feedback. Maybe you've given survey feedback. Maybe you've talked to your boss about it, and that feedback's been percolated up to the highest levels. And so these goals were set. And then cascading goals are what cascades down the chain of command. There are only 5 layers of management in my company. So there's not a whole lot of cascading that has to happen, but I know in a lot of organizations there's a lot more layers. But that's one way you as a project manager are implementing strategic objectives of your company. Then you can have team goals. Maybe your objective is to increase quality by a certain %, and you can measure that based on your client satisfaction surveys. So if on a scale of 1 to 10, you ask your client, how satisfied are you with the quality of the software we've developed for you? How satisfied are you with the mobile app we developed for you? Or maybe we transform your digital footprint. And they give you a score of 9 out of 10, that's pretty good. And that should translate to probably a strategic goal. And that's how we do it. Those metrics also can be measured even if you don't do client surveys. You could do that yourself. So that's how you, as a project manager, could take it upon yourself, or you as a PMO director or manager could take it upon yourself to ask your clients, internal or external too, don't get me wrong, right? Because you have internal clients as well, maybe HR and finance and those guys. And so find out how you're doing. And you can map those metrics up to the strategic goals as well, because maybe part of it is operational efficiencies. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. Because we're measured on everything. Everything from when the performance reviews are done, how timely are they? When the membership surveys are done, so when the survey gets sent to the member, how long does it take for them to do it? And it kind of makes sense if you think about it, because how long that person takes to do it, are they hating to do it? Do they really not want to do it? I mean, I'm kind of surveyed to death. I don't know about you guys, but when I know my bonus depends on that, I'm going to fill it out. Because all of us are measured on all of us getting it done in a timely manner. So there's incentive there. And then, of course, like on-time deliveries. Like if you promised a client that you were going to have their website done or their e-commerce site developed by a certain date, then they expect that to be done, probably because they've probably told all their shareholders that this is going to happen and that they're going to be able to increase business by a certain amount. So that would be a way for you to have a direct impact. So how can we make sure that we're meeting expectations around the goals that we've set to meet our strategic objectives? Well, obviously, we need to figure out who our stakeholders are and be communicating with them often. So at CGI, we have weekly status reviews, we have operational status reviews, we have project management status reviews. So those are all good ways. Any other creative ways to maybe get feedback? Yes, sir?
One thing, well, we don't do that where I work now, but at another company that I worked at, it was GTE Directories. We were working on the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award, so we were very much focused on client satisfaction. One of the things they did there that I really liked was when they measured client satisfaction, not all clients had the same criteria or value of the metrics, like on-time delivery, perhaps quality, or how frequently information or their content that goes out in directories might be of greater value to them. So we didn't treat each client as one size fits all. We adapted these strategies by these major clients and focused and adjusted what we did to try to improve based on their needs at that little more granular level.
That is a really good idea. And I'd like to say that we do that, but I honestly don't know. I know we're broken up into sectors. So we're broken up like by financial services, by retail, by medical, we're broke up like that. But I don't know if they do that.
You know, even with projects within the city of Garland, some clients favor the quality over the on-time delivery.
Absolutely.
Quality is number one.
Right.
Cost might be number three. Delivery, on-time delivery may be number five.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you an example of that, and I need to get your name because we actually work with City of Garland.
Greg.
Is that where you are now? Okay. All right. Good. Yes, sir.
When you talk about the client, what does that mean? Who is the client? And are you talking about top management at the client? Are you talking about lower levels in the organization when you do these surveys?
It depends on where you are and what you're doing, right? In my world, I'm in consulting, so I have clients,
And you're dealing with top management?
Yes, yeah. So because like right now, one of my clients, I'm building what's called EMV, which a lot of project managers confuse with EVM. It's not earned value management. It's Euro, MasterCard, Visa. And it is the way that Europe and Canada have been processing payments for 10 years now. But we in the US are behind. And recently people like Neiman Marcus, Target, lots of people have been hacked, right? And so my client doesn't really care about an on-time delivery with this. They just have to do it because it's a federal requirement now, right? They're on a timeline, and all these different groups like retailers, gas station pumps, grocery stores, they all have a different schedule per the government. But by a certain date, they have to have the secure payment system set up. Well, I could probably ask you guys, and you could probably name them, the number of companies that do those PIN pad, the PIN pad software and provide the hardware for the PIN pads. Verifone, Ingenico, and now Apple Pay has their own version. You think those guys are pretty busy right now? So my client knows that those third-party vendors are plowed over and that we're one of the few companies who's done this successfully with retailers. So they want us, plus we've worked with them for 20 years, so they trust us. But on-time delivery for that is not so important as it being right, right? Because when they push that all out to their stores and you go in and stick your credit card, your PIN and chip card into that machine and it doesn't work, that's a problem, right? Because with retailers, it's all about get to go, get to payment. So that's a good example. But yeah, I hear you. It depends on where you are. If you're in an organization that doesn't have external clients, then your clients might be up the chain of command. They might be HR. I've had projects where HR and IT were my clients. So you can have internal clients, you can have external clients. You need to be thinking about how you meet their strategic objectives regardless of whether they're internal or external clients. But thank you, that was good. All right. So begin at the beginning, slide 2. So there are different organizational models. There are different ways the PMO fits within the structure, if you even have a PMO. And based on where they are in the organization, drives how you map to them. So one kind of PMO would be a governance PMO, right? And so they have oversight responsibilities, they have auditing responsibilities. They're an early warning system for the upper layers of the chain of command for something going wrong. So what happens with us is this group within our organization is when your project goes red in a certain number of metrics, they get involved. And it's kind of like the saying, you get the help you don't really want. So the governance PMO, to be effective, really needs to sit, in Kurt and my opinion in discussion yesterday, at the COO level. Because to us, if you're reporting under the CIO, and he or she reports to the CFO, and you're bringing up a budgetary problem that's going to make the CFO look bad, you can see the problem with escalating, right? And I've suffered it. I will not name names to protect the guilty, but I have been in a PMO where I was reporting the truth, and I was killed for it. I was fired. Fired. Nobody told me, took me to the side and said, Tresia, they really don't want to know that it's failing. Actually, what I got told is, you should have fixed it. But I was a governance PMO. I didn't have the authority. I didn't own the developers. I didn't own the testers. I didn't own anybody to be able to fix it, right? So watch out for those scenarios. That's not where you want to be. How many of you work with a governance PMO? So another kind of PMO, not very many of you, like 3 of you raised your hand. So another kind of PMO is a best practices PMO. And I think this is a little more flexible in terms of where it can live in the organizational model, just because it's more of an advisory role. It's more about mentoring and giving you templates and giving you a direction to work, if that's what you want with your project. But it's optional. And to me, that means if you are not directly tied to the business and the bottom line, that kind of puts you in a tenuous place if things go bad. How many of you happen to work with a best practices PMO? So more folks. And do you find that they're effective? Do you use the stuff that they offer you? Yeah? I got a yes? Yes? Okay, good. So there's also the functional PMO. The functional PMO, I think, also has a little more flexibility, but you can disagree with me as to where it lives in the organization. I see a lot of these under the CIO, but more and more, I'm seeing them under the COO, because functional means you have the developers, you have the testers, you have the business analyst, and you may be client-facing or may not be, But either way, you have total authority and total responsibility. You own the budget, so you have complete functional responsibility for your work. How many of you are in that kind of situation? I kind of envy you, because to me, that's my favorite kind of PMO. So, and then there's a hybrid, right? There are combinations of all of these. And so, anybody work in a hybrid? Wow.
Can you clarify something? When you talk about functional PMO, are you talking about a projectized organization where people who are on your team report directly to the project manager?
Yes. Yeah. And that's my favorite, because I get to develop the project managers. I get to help them troubleshoot with the developers to figure out, how they can help them, or troubleshoot with the testers to figure out how they can help them. That's definitely my preference. So this, you don't get that opportunity very much to where you get to pick and choose your PMO. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think the challenge of a functional organization is it doesn't scale very well,
Right.
especially when you're looking at, leveraging competencies across the.
Right. That's exactly right. All right. So regardless of what kind of PMO you have, or if you don't have one, you can still lead up. I find myself managing my boss a lot. And you know what? He can have all the credit. It doesn't have to be my idea. And that's one thing that I would say I want to be the Brene Brown of project management, is that I want your satisfaction to be from within, and that you don't have to feel like you get the credit, because in our job, a lot of times it's a very thankless job. And so, just knowing that you're developing your people, even if it's your boss, and you're helping your organization, you're doing something for the greater good. And I get a lot of personal satisfaction from that. So regardless of where you are, from the most junior project manager to the most senior director of PMO, to I've even seen, chief project officers. I've seen vice president of project management for the whole company. So, to a lot of companies, our discipline, our profession is very important. It is a strategic objective of their organization to be effective at project management. So I think we're in a very exciting profession. So let's talk about operational efficiencies. So obviously, through controlling budgets, your scope, your schedule, resource allocation, and quality, you're able to bring operational efficiency. So you're helping your company meet those objectives, even in your project, by keeping these things on track, right? I think operational efficiency is probably the simplest way for you to see how you can impact the strategic objectives of your company. You're able to monitor and control those objectives through governance and reporting and metrics, and then transparency. I also really want to be in companies that are comfortable with transparency. I was in an organization one time, again, I will not name the guilty, where I actually had a project manager come to me and offer to change the quality metric on reports that were going up to the client because we didn't meet what was in our statement of work. And she said, you know what? If I just kind of leave this little bitty piece of data out, we're just fine. And I said, no, we're not going to do that. A, because I don't look good in orange. And B, because that's just not right. And I won't be able to sleep at night. So, we did turn it in with all the accurate, transparent information. And what ended up coming of it was very good. Now, I don't think that happens all the time. I'm not going to stand up here like Pollyanna and tell you that it's always going to be that way. But I personally can live with that. Like, I can live with knowing I did the right things. So I think transparency is really important. I think also from any level of an organization, you can add value. Well, what are ways that I can add value? Well, you'd be surprised how you can innovate as a project manager. You know, I find the longer I do this, that people tend to get very close-minded, especially in PMI. You know, we have our great PMI information, the PMBOK, you know. We have this great academic kind of cookie cutter approach to these key process areas. This is how you do risk. This is how you do scheduling. This is how you do every aspect of project management. But out in the real world, things can be a little different. The tools are different. The concepts are different. The projects are different. And what you have to understand is that PMBOK is built with a base of people that have a very limited amount of experience. They could be some of the brightest minds in the world that help build the PMBOK, but it's still a limited number of people with a limited experience base. They can't account for every single project. So it's just a guideline, right? When you see that somebody has their PMP, you think, okay, it's kind of like having, okay, it's better than having an ITIL cert, but ITIL cert's a good example too, right? It's a base foundation of data. But if you see somebody who has a PMP and a Lean Six Sigma and an ITIL and 20 years of experience, you kind of go, I bet he knows what he's doing there. You kind of have a little more confidence. And so I think we all know there are ways we can add value. Yes, ma'am.
Are you finding the planning windows are shortening? Because I seem to hear that a lot, that versus like an organizational planning that might be looking at 3 and 5 years, I'm hearing that a lot of companies now are just moving away from the 3 and 5 year and really focusing on even like a single year, or in some cases just focusing on the current year on the window. And I would think that that would then roll over to the PMO when the windows are starting to shorten.
Well, I'll tell you, yes, definitely. And it has a lot to do with us being a technology consulting company, right? Regardless of the sector that we work with, retail, medical, whatever it is, it's still technology. And that's the thing that's driving the shorter periods, right? Is technology is changing so quickly, we have to be able to be more responsive. I can't even tell you really what's in our 3 to 5 year plan. I have a copy of it because I'm a shareholder, so I get a copy of it. But honestly, I can't even fathom what that looks like because I'm trying to digest, you know, the annual strategic plan. And that's enough. I mean, you've got the big data, the Internet of Things, you've got all these concepts that are huge that you're supposed to wrap your brain around, because when you walk into that client, you may have done one project 10 years ago, they're expecting you to know the most current stuff. I'll give you an example. I implemented PeopleSoft 10 years ago, but we had a client who was interested in updating their PeopleSoft, and you have to go in and talk to them about it. I did a lot of research the night before, going out to the sites, getting myself up to date so that I could actually be a little more knowledgeable when I went into that session. But you're right. I mean, it's hard to do 3 to 5 years out because you don't even know where the technology is going to be, right? Somebody, I think, raised their hand. Did I? Okay. Do your organizations encourage your ideas for innovation? And could you tell us a story about it? Maybe where you innovated, thought of a new way to use a tool, thought of a new way to improve our process. Okay. So for growth. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think innovation is also on the aspect of the older, because it's really, many people may think that innovation needs to be something new, create out of scratch, but maybe you can just get from other group or other company that already experienced and just try to implement it. Just changing your status quo, that may be a part of innovation.
Yep, I agree with that. I'm trying to think of an example. Do you have an example from your experience? I was trying to think of one from mine where I may have stolen something from one of the other groups. I like Agile, but I rarely see any organization truly willing, I mean, we wouldn't have a job if Agile were truly Agile, right? Because it doesn't prescribe project management. So I like concepts of Agile. So what I have a tendency to do is I'll take little niblets from big things and implement them. So proof of concepts are a big deal with our clients. I can get you to bite off on a $50,000 proof of concept where you may not want to buy off on a $2 million project. And if I say to you, I'll do that $50,000 proof of concept, and if you like it, then you buy it. So that's kind of an Agile approach because I'm prototyping. I'm not going to build this huge big thing for you for $2 million and then plop it in your lap and hope it all works. I'm going to give you a little taste, and if you like it, then I'm going to give you this is how we do deliveries, is in phases anyway. So I think we can use that in project management as well. But so, oh, he did have okay.
I was going to comment on innovation. What we found is that innovation is just the first step to really get value. You have to have a process for it to be fanned out through the organization. And when we set up our PMO, the complaint we got over and over was they had all these meetings, all these best practices, all these lessons learned, and then it just sat in a report somewhere. So we had to put in place a structured process so that the innovative ideas got fed back into the next project. So it's not just innovation. You have to have a way, and this is where the best practices comes in to get it implemented in the next project, in the project after.
Yeah, you have to create a learning organization, basically.
Yeah, almost like your own wiki within your company, which I've only seen a few places really do that effectively. Salesforce.com has a really effective wiki, as you can probably imagine.
Well, this is, okay, we found wikis were not very effective because people then have to go and say what's in the wiki to find out. So,
They have to search, okay.
yeah, we set up another, but I won't get into the details, but the point is, it's got to be something that's part of the project plan so that it gets done.
We have a program called ICE, and it's the Innovation Center of Excellence. And you can go there and input an idea, and it's almost like, what do they call it? Social reviews, like people vote on your idea. And if you get enough, you get enough votes that it gets rolled out, like it gets money behind it and it's implemented and rolled out. So, it doesn't happen very often that an idea gets that much traction, but it does happen. So, yes, sir.
I think part of innovation, to make it successful, I believe there's some level of governance you need over those innovative suggestions. In other words, if you have 500 people in your organization, and everybody's coming up with what they think is a better way to do something, and haven't got buy-in from management to allow you to work on those things, and you've sold the idea and presented maybe a business case for doing it, somebody needs to weigh in on those, look at the overall corporate objectives or goals, and try to match those to where we're really headed and where are we going to get the greatest value, or enough value to make it worth our while to add some confusion, changing the way we do things.
Right, I agree. We had that conversation too in terms of understanding the context of what's going to be the value to the user of what you're implementing. So, yeah, somebody needs to be in charge of that. In our company, it's that group that runs the ICE initiatives, and they do look at that. There has to be a business case, and actually the person inputting the innovation idea has to build the business case in a template and submit it for review, and then that group judges. There's a panel, and they look at it and review it, and then it has a process. But I agree, you do need a process around it.
Yes. So you were in the military doing project management, so I would imagine that the people that were the decision makers have been promoted from the ranks within the military. I don't know if that's a false presumption, but what is your observation within companies as far as senior management having been promoted from within versus external hires? And the reason I'm asking is because I was somewhere where I saw a lot of entrenched type of behavior and attachment to software that needed to be updated, but there was resistance because this more senior managers and attached to that software had come up within the ranks, so they had been the ones 5 and 10 years ago that had put that into place. So changing it was like a negative comment on them or something that they had done earlier on. So I'd just be curious on your thoughts about that.
So you know what the average lifespan of a CIO is? 18 months. And I'm literally one of my clients right now. He resigned today as the CIO of a company. So don't you all go check in Business Wire or whatever and trying to figure out who my client is. But anyway, yeah, they don't live very long. And you know why? I think because they have an extremely difficult job. And either they're battling that, they're battling the entrenched legacy systems that the company has not planned properly to replace or maintain even, or they're battling this, oh, pretty new shiny thing, pretty new shiny thing, pretty new shiny thing. So even getting a company, going back to your previous comment, to commit to 1 year of strategic planning, you can see if you're always going after the next pretty shiny thing, how difficult it is to make progress. Or if you have these entrenched legacy systems and you come in as the guy that's going to try to update all that and make y'all new fandangled whiz-bang technology, you don't go over real well with the board who's entrenched and been there and probably built that old financial system that's falling apart. So, yeah. Yes, sir.
I watch the business news in the morning, and one of the things that was brilliant one morning.
I thought you were going to tell me which CIO I saw.
One of the things that came up is they had a number of merger and acquisitions people on one morning, and they were talking about corporate strategy, merger and acquisitions, and they were talking about how it was changing. And one guy said, corporate strategy used to be here, it is now here. It can't go out more than 6 months now because he says once the dogs of war from finance are released, literally you can have a company like Amazon, they got plenty of cash, Facebook, and they can walk in and boom, boom, your company's done. And he said that one of the things that is happening is that the financial capability of a company, its success in the marketplace, they're always looking at 3 different strategies. First, defensive. How do we fend off the takeover? The one is to fully accept the takeover, and how is it going to improve our systems? And it was amazing. In the morning, they were talking about what was going on in Europe. There was one company buying another one. And some of these people have been involved in that. And they said, today in graduate school for MBAs, merger and acquisition is got to be on the table as a course or two, because when they leave, that's literally what they're going to be thrown into, because these young graduates, well, they were talking about projects, and they said the project length of time has gone from a year or 2, 3 years, shorter and shorter. He said if a project is over 4 months long, it's considered something that has to be considered speculative.
That's
and I
interesting.
thought that was very interesting, because he said it's money and time, and as long as we realize that. And the one thing that the guy brought up, he says, how many people sit in a corporation where when you open up the web screen in the morning, the stock price sits up there in the corner? He said never before in history have employees been so sensitive to the stock price as they are now. And because of that stock price and how it fluctuates, you may have agendas where you want to talk about innovation, and now all of a sudden they're talking about defensive strategy for the next 2 months because a rumor in the newspaper caused their stock price to go down, and they've got to. So project management today is literally more dynamic, but it's also something that is more susceptible to financial and political change within the company. And years ago, you know, we had the steel companies, the auto companies, they didn't make changes for decades. Today, they make changes overnight. And it is one of the things that this guy brought up is he said, I will bet the average life of a PMO leader in these companies, and he went down and listed the companies, is if it's more than 6 months, it'll be a miracle. And he said, CIO, I think he'll be around for an extra month. So when you talk about the turnover, and he said there is a generational turnover and a financial turnover now, and the public doesn't see it. But some of the project managers, the CIOs, and the M&A people and the lawyers see it. And this is something you've got to be aware of, whatever company you're in. So.
Yeah, I've been involved in actually M&A projects. So you can actually be a project manager of an M&A effort. You can be the PMO director of M&A. And so there is process, right? You have to do your due diligence. You go do interviews with the company that you're looking to acquire. You look at all their assets. There's a whole financial scrubbing that happens. There is a process for M&A. I will tell you, I've seen in my company a very short attention span with that. So if they don't have something that's the pretty shiny thing that is worth them going after, because I'll tell you, my company is very financially risk averse. So if there is not some big motivating factor and they can move it quickly, I'm not even thinking 6 months, I'm thinking 2 to 3 months to acquire that organization, they won't bother. And I mean, we're a $10 billion company, and we just bought a company bigger than us. We bought Logica. And when we bought Logica, it was because we needed the staffing and the people in Europe to help us do what we were trying to do. And when they first talked about buying Logica, I mean, you wouldn't believe how people were laughing to say, how can a company that's worth $3 billion buy a company worth $4 billion? And they did it. But there was that motivating factor of they needed those offices and those people in Europe for what they were trying to do based on their strategic objectives, and they could move it along quickly. So, yeah, I hear you. But the lifespan of a CIO on average is 18 months. This particular one today, 14 months. But, you know, I have friends who've been CIOs for 13 years in their organization. You know, it may be a very high-powered law firm, and they've been a CIO there for 13 years, or a private equity firm where they've been the CIO for 12 years or 15 years. It just depends on the market. It doesn't work that way in high tech. I don't know very many CIOs who've been in high tech. If you know of one, name them. But so, growth. How can you influence growth? Well, I can tell you that in my job, a lot of times what happens as a result of good delivery is I get asked back. Well, Tresia did a really good job on this particular project. We'd like to have her back. So it can be personal. It can be based on your reputation. It can be based on your skill set. Oh, she knows Salesforce.com, or she knows Workday, or she knows SAP or Oracle, whatever the case may be. So you can influence growth personally that way. You can offer resources from the PMO to support other teams. Now, I know everybody doesn't have this flexibility, so just kind of open your mind with me for a minute if you don't. But IT is becoming a billable organization, right? So I know organizations where now, however many desktops IT supports through the help desk, they bill that business unit. And that's a very common thing we see nowadays. So why can't you make money as a PMO? Oh, I'd like to have Tresia come work with my implementation team or my M&A team or whatever the case may be, and I'm going to pay back your business unit for 1,500 hours of her time. I mean, these are kind of innovative concepts, but there are ways for you to show growth. One way I showed growth was we implemented a system called Workday. How many of you know what Workday is? So we implemented the system called Workday. And this is where it gets a little dicey. So the thing about Workday is that it automates a whole lot of stuff that a lot of HR folks have done by hand for a long time. Onboarding, benefits, payroll, a lot of things that used to be paper-based, kind of a paper-based workflow, are automated through Workday, through integrations. So they plug into your bank from your company's bank, and they say, Tresia worked however many hours this period, she gets paid this much, I zap it into your bank. There's no payroll person in there. Now, you need to be added to Workday. There's somebody who needs to add you. But pretty soon, I'm sure we'll have a way around that as well. But that's a way for reducing cost, but you're taking jobs away. And what if you worked with those people for 10 or 15 years in your personal relationships? That's where it gets a little dicey. But there are plenty of ways, no matter where you are in the organization, that you can provide growth opportunities. I listed M&A for a reason, because guess who can give the idea to your company to buy another company? You. So you have experience implementing a certain product. You know that product is hot, it's going places, and you suggest to your company that they procure a company. Now, it depends on, obviously, how big your company is. You know, maybe a 500-person company is not going to just rush in and buy something. But for my company, a $10 billion company that's very financially prudent, so we have a lot of cash, buying a $50 million company that's up and coming because they have a product we want to sell to our clients, that's a pretty easy thing to do. So that's a way you can incur growth without organically growing your accounts or growing your business or growing your bottom line. Did I see a hand? Yes, sir.
Yeah, on the M&A thing, in addition to that, a really important role of project management is to later make sure that that growth, promised growth, actually takes place, because most of the mergers tend to lose momentum when it comes to integration. I mean, I know I live in a company that has a lot of different acquisitions, and there's still a whole bunch of different tribes running around. And you need that discipline of consistency to drive the value out. Because once Champagne went flat and everybody moved on to the next one, it just assumed that naturally all this would come together. So that's kind of a really important role for project management.
Right. And so I think we do this pretty well. Like when we bought Logica, and we immediately made them members. Like they had access to all the same resources we had. They were immersed in the culture. You know, if they were at home or on client site, they had to come into an office and participate in events for a certain period of time, just so we could integrate them into our company. Because when you take on that many new employees, it's a cultural shift to like, and that's not necessarily a process I can define for you as a project manager to say, if you do step A, B, C, and D, the end result will be all these people from this company will now be a good, healthy part of your company. Because it's human beings, and they're not always predictable. I can give you some good ideas, I can give you some data. I can tell you that something like 70% of all mergers and acquisitions fail from a human perspective, meaning most of those people leave the company because they're not happy with what happened. They don't fit well into the new culture, so it fails. So when I suggest to CGI to buy a company, I'm thinking about how will those people fit into our culture, you know, not just about, well, the products would be really great. I know this client needs it, and that client needs it, and that client needs it, and we'd make our money back on the acquisition within 6 months. It's not just about that, it's the human factor. And so that's why I think PMI has now adopted this triangle, because there's a lot more to project management than just the technical skills, right? So obviously you can look for new products and services to offer internal and external clients like we were talking about. You could offer project managers to HR. If you don't have a cross-functional PMO that can offer PMs, you could suggest that. And like I said, I was a cross-functional PM for HR and IT to implement Workday. And the steering committee was made up of the CIO and the Chief Administrative Officer who had HR for the company, And that was my steering committee. So my senior stakeholders were in my steering committee every week. So there are lots of ways for you to offer growth ideas. Another way, extend the scope of what you're doing. So I have a client who's turned to us for managed security services. They said, you know what, we got breached, our network got hacked. We are not network people, we are retail people. Well, at CGI, we have data centers, we're security people, we're network people. So they said, we'd like to give you all that, you just send us a bill every month. We said, okay. So while we're in there implementing this, various tools that check their network, check their desktops for viruses, threat analysis, all that kind of stuff. Once that was implemented, they said, well, wait a minute, are you not going to do the firewalls? And we're like, well, look at the statement of work. You don't want the firewalls. Well, now we want the firewalls. Okay, we'll add the firewalls in. So you get business and growth organically through the work that you're already doing successfully. I think that makes sense to everybody. And then another way that you can encourage growth is through selling PM inside your company, right? So you can say, per project, I've saved 20 to 25% on resource utilization. For you, that may mean my project manager didn't sit on the bench longer than 1 week for 5 years because I was able to put that person against the next project. And a lot of that has to do with your relationships internal to the company, your knowledge of the business clients, how well your recruiters or your workforce management people are working to get that person placed. Yes, sir.
When you talk about this internal savings, how long can that go on? Because what I see there is a potential for a lot of internal politics and corruption, so to speak, to try and fudge those numbers so they're not real.
Give me an example.
Well, so you save 25% this year. How are you going to save more next year? You keep reducing what you're spending, but you're trying to grow and everything's, it doesn't make sense to me.
Okay.
You can't continue saving until you're down.
Right. Once you've saved in that area, you're kind of done and you have to move on to something
So
else.
how do you continue that savings? And I see a lot of project managers will try and do something, or a lot of managers will force something to be done to show that savings.
Yeah, that's like an integrity thing, I think. I don't know. Yes, sir?
Yeah, so even though you save this year, next year you have new challenges, new systems implemented, new things done, and these new items that you're dealing with is what you can save off of. So usually when you launch something, you start something, it's not going to be efficient, but that's how you can take that and start the efficiency and savings. So you can continue on saving 25% every year because business changed, because processes changes, because everything changed. So that's why you keep on, you can continue on doing saving.
Well, I was thinking about his question in terms of like my Workday implementation project I was talking about, right? So I unfortunately cut 6 people based on the automation, right? That happens.
Savings.
That was 1 year savings based on their annual salaries. But I'm not paying those 6 people. You know what I'm saying? Like if the difference between buying the Workday licenses and all of HR and letting go of those 6 people was a savings of 20%, I'm not next year paying 6 more people to do, it's maybe
Next year's budget is 20% less, so how do you save 20% more?
right. And then you have to look at, or you look at your benefits providers, right? And you see who's willing to work with you. Yeah, I see what you're saying. You have to look somewhere else.
Right, so that the numbers can start being, I see a little problem there sometimes if you don't watch it. You gotta be carefully.
Yeah, I agree. You have to be thoughtful. Yeah. All right. How am I doing? Oh, good Lord, I said I wouldn't go this long. Okay. New products and services. Consider how your PMO can offer support for new product development. Kurt and I were talking about this. If you're a new product development company, perhaps a PM can help move the ideas along, as we were talking about with like an innovation. There's a process for implementing a new product or service. You can help sell the idea of PMO oversight. And then if cloud solutions are involved, you can offer services as an upgrade and a premium to your clients. So let's say my client was just going to implement managed security services, but there was no project management around it. In other words, they were going to buy the hardware was going to come to our shop, we were going to configure it, we're going to ship the hardware to the client, they're going to plug it in, we're going to turn it on, and hopefully it works. No project management. But you could sell the services of a project manager to oversee all of that, to have a schedule, to mitigate risk. What if the hardware is late? What if it gets lost? Yes, sir.
In your opinion, professional opinion, what do you think is the greatest value that a PMO can offer to an organization?
Lots of them. I think resource utilization, not just the project management itself, but across the organization. So the development resources, the quality assurance resources, the business analyst resources, there are efficiencies that the project manager can bring to the utilization of those teams. In other words, if I'm looking at the project schedule and I see a way to do something in parallel rather than sequentially, then I'm going to do that. And that may free this guy up so that he can go work on another gig and make more money for the company. You see what I'm saying? So I think resource utilization is one thing. That leads to money. So I think there's a lot of benefits from money around project management. Quality. I think sometimes those folks that I was talking about that kind of have their blinders on and they only kind of look at their one area, but you come from a broader background maybe as the project manager and you see a problem with what they're doing or the design of what they're doing, or they haven't thought about an integration here, or they've left out something there, you can offer that.
And are you talking about that from a shared services side?
Am I talking about that from a
shared services perspective?
What kind of services?
Shared.
Shared services, yes. Yeah, that's the preponderance of what I've worked in, is the environment where you're a shared service.
Could I just take a shot at answering the question?
Sure.
My experience on the biggest value of the PMO comes from that earlier question about innovation and how do you fan out innovation. If you don't have an organization like a PMO, then innovation in one project doesn't get fanned out to the others. And talking about resource utilization, Tresia just said, now you have every project manager arguing with the functional managers for the resources they need. And that's a waste of time for the project manager. So again, you have a system in place through the PMO. So these best practices, the way you can implement innovations, now gets fanned out across all the projects. So that's just my take on the question.
Yeah, and I think one of the largest benefits you get from having a PMO in place is, predictable results, right? And standardization of ways of doing it. So if you think about that most projects fail, is the percentage of failure or overruns in terms of cost, schedule, all of them, or quality, right? By having a PMO, you essentially bring together the organizational process assets, standardize way of doing it, reuse, all the good things that you look for when you're delivering something. That's really where a PMO brings.
And I rarely have to write a schedule for anything. Like I can always go into our knowledge database and pull a schedule similar. I may have to pull chunks of it out, modify it, but I rarely have to write a schedule from scratch. So that's another benefit too. All of that experience kept in a nice central location where we can get to it. Yes?
Wouldn't the PMO also be authority? So if you're arguing between two projects that need resources?
Facilitation. Yes, that's one thing I should have thought to add. Yeah, facilitation, mentoring.
Mentoring, the whole bit. There's so many things that you can gain from.
Yeah, I like to use the term sistering just because we live in such a male-dominated language. But sistering is a nice female strong word, which means to shore up, right? A sister joint. And I've seen it on Facebook, this funny video of gal pals kind of sistering each other, holding someone up when they're falling apart. But sistering in project management, I think, is it's an alternate term to peer reviewing or peering. I like sistering better. All right, well, I have taken up enough of your time, more than I expected to take up. But any more comments or questions or areas that we should cover. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to make a comment, kind of like you began with, the whole premise of this being aligning your PMO to your strategy. One of the things I've learned in the past is don't just have a PMO for the PMO's sake. Kind of like you said, people always want the shiny new thing. You find in business, they hear things like Six Sigma and then it's a fad. Oh, we have to use Six Sigma. We need a PMO. And you oftentimes find organizations trying to set things up and it's like, well, what can we throw under the umbrella of a PMO? And they just keep doing this additive process, throwing more and more stuff at a PMO, when in fact you don't necessarily need that organization to do all those things. So you need to make sure that the PMO is only doing the things that other functional areas within the organization can't already do more effectively on their own, such as governance. If you already have a governance structure that's handling things really well and has reporting and accounting and all that, maybe you don't need the PMO to handle governance,
There is a whole chapter in my book all about that very fact. You are a very smart man. All right, can we have the nominees of the greatest participants tonight? I'm going to give one to Kurt just because he's my favorite. I'm sorry, y'all.
I think really careful setting up PMO, where you position it in an organization
Right there from
is
DHL.
really the most important factor in its success, because you can position it anywhere, but in my experience is if you position a PMO in a functional organization, you've just shot yourself in the foot. It's got to be orthogonal organizationally, have independent authority reporting into the highest levels of management to really...
You have to have real support.
And that's where the strategy implementation comes in. You're really targeting portfolio management at that point.
Yes, and your job is to make them look good and successful. I want to give one to this lady right here, just because she was very helpful to me.
I do have another question.
Oh, good. See, you've even earned the book.
So it's more from a curiosity standpoint, and it tagged on to the question that I asked earlier. So I was somewhere earlier where there was an entrenched software that didn't seem to be going anywhere, and I was personally concerned for the future, for my own presence there. I'm no longer there. But I wondered how they were going to transition off of this software when there were approximately 40 to 60 people who were attached to that old software and had a specialized knowledge about that would jeopardize their jobs, obviously. So just curious, have you observed situations where there's a parallel pathing, and how's the PMO involved in that? So this same company was at the early stages of setting up a PMO, and I was curious how that was going to work out when the folks in the PMO were going to be either secretly or publicly, transparently working to replace the 40 to 60 positions with a new software. And I wasn't exactly clear on how these 40 to 60 people were going to be working on the new software because of the nature of the software. So when you're an expert in A and the company's transitioning to B, and there's not a clear path between knowledge of A to B, then that implied to me that they would be replacing those people. And so I was wondering, would there be a mass exodus of those people when they got wind that the PMO was working on replacing that software?
So I thought of the Workday project I was telling you about, and I can tell you that the people who were more involved in implementing Workday, they got all the training, they became very savvy in the new product, so they were able to transition off of the old ADP HR implementation and migrate to Workday very easily. But the ones that were kind of disengaged and happy to stay in their everyday processes, those are the ones that pretty much got phased out, right? So the way you make yourself valuable in that kind of situation, and I'm just thinking of this from a personal perspective. If I were one of those 40 to 60 people, more than from a project management perspective, I would be learning as much as I could about this new technology that was going to define my job going forward so that I could make myself valuable. I mean, they have to take some personal responsibility, right? But as the project manager, I would be saying, where's the training plan? How are we migrating these people over? Do they have the opportunity to internally transition to a different group or to, I would be asking those questions as a PM too. All right, well, thank you so much for your time and attention.
We have a little something here for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much for joining us. Take care. See you next time.